Christians are supposed to condemn immorality wherever we find it. And too often, if it's our side, then we think the ends justify the means. And unfortunately, progress and genuine national repentance will never happen if that is the case. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Lincoln, but there's a great scene in Lincoln that gets my attention, and I'm going to recreate it briefly here. But Lincoln is having a private discussion with Thaddeus Stevens, one of the greatest anti-abolitionists, I should say, congressman in Washington at the time. He was leading the charge to free slaves in the passing of the 13th Amendment. But as Lincoln starts the discussion, he tells Stevens, and you need to tone down the rhetoric a little bit. You need to go easy on the South. And of course, Thaddeus Stevens didn't want to hear that. Are you kidding me? When we win the war, we're going to use the force of authority to make them treat black men as free. We're going to give them land, and we're going to give them protection so that they can prosper on their own land. Well, that was Stevens' position. Lincoln, of course, said, you need to go easy on that kind of talk. I like what Stevens said after that. He said, the people of Illinois elected me to lead, and that's what I'm going to do is lead. You should try it sometime, Mr. President. Lincoln's response to that, he said, you're very zealous, and I've tried to profit from your example. But if I had listened to you, Stevens, and if I had declared the slaves free when the first shells hit Fort Sumter, the border states would have gone over to the South. We would have lost the war, and we would have lost the Union. And instead of getting rid of slavery, slavery would have gone down into South America. Stevens' response to that was, you've been wanting to say that to me forever, but here's the problem, Mr. Lincoln. You and I know that men and women, white men and women, both North and South, do not follow that moral compass that God gives every man that ought to direct him towards righteousness. That moral compass in the white man in America is ossified and it's useless. Fact of the matter is that white men and women are just not prepared to share this country's infinite resources with the black man. And of course, in the movie, you can see that Tommy Lee Jones, who plays Stevens, thinks he's really put Lincoln in his place. But you know what Lincoln's response to that was? It's that compass. Learned about the compass when I was a surveyor. It'll point you true north, no matter where you're at. But the compass has no insight to give you on the problems you'll encounter along the way. It has nothing to say about the swamps, the chasms, and the deserts that you will encounter. And if you strike out due north without taking those things into account and you end up stranded in a swamp, what's the good of knowing true north? That was the end of the scene because Stevens understood what Lincoln was saying. And when Stevens got on the floor to give his final speech where Lincoln said, you need to ease up, you know what Stevens said? He said, I only admit that blacks ought to be treated equal under the law. In other words, I don't really concede that blacks are equal, but they should be treated equal under the law. I can't imagine there's a black man that wouldn't take offense to that. A black person wouldn't take offense to that. But the reason they didn't take offense to it was because they knew why he said it. He said it because he was really trying to abolish slavery. And that, my friends, is one of the dangers of Christians getting heavily involved in politics. H. Leo Bowles, one of the most scholarly brethren the church has ever produced, he took over for the Nashville Bible College after David Lipscomb sat at David Lipscomb's feet for years. He wrote a book where he sketched out the life of many preachers and teachers in the Restoration movement. And he wrote a biographical sketch of James Garfield, the only president the church has ever produced. He said this about Garfield, and he made this statement in general in his biography on Garfield. He said this: "It is to be regretted that Mr. Garfield entered the field of politics. He became too busy to preach the gospel. He had to neglect the church and his religious life in order to be a success in the political field." And here's the statement that really gets my attention: "No Christian can be a success as a politician and make a success of the Christian life." Now, here's what I would say in response to that. I don't really agree with that statement. I think a Christian can go into politics. But I also think at the same time, H. Leo Bowles sounds the trumpet call that all Christians need to heed. And that is, when you are a Christian, you need to remember that your citizenship is in heaven, and that politics has a way of taking our eyes off of God and his thoughts and bringing our thoughts down to the thoughts of man. And man is quite often in the field of politics very wise to do evil. Salvation came to Zacchaeus' house. Did you know that Zacchaeus is the only person in the New Testament that Jesus invites himself into his house? And he's the last person you would have expected Jesus to do that for. But then again, didn't Jesus say the last shall be first and the first shall be last? Thank you, brethren. Appreciate you tuning in. God bless, and I hope you have a good day. Bye-bye.